Okay, good afternoon, and thank you for the introduction, and thank you for attending this session. I'm going to give a very quick introduction because we have three very interesting researchers coming up after me. I just want to give a perspective, kind of a different perspective, because I work as a media officer where your science eventually gets into the public sphere or into the media. And I thought that that would be interesting and important as well to get that bigger picture. So I assume you are here because you already have an online ID or you want to have one. And I use the word online identity and not social identity because what is important is that there's a difference between the two. And I want you to look at the following two infographics. So if we look at what's happening on the internet in 60 seconds, there's that one infographic, and if the internet works, then we have this. So this is the kind of world that we are working in. There we go. Okay, so this is supposed to be happening now while we are talking. Okay. Okay, there's an advertisement. And then think, since you've been on this page, all the Google searches and how many emails were sent. So we really do live in the digital age. Okay. Now look at this image. Okay. This is closer maybe to your world. Nature did a survey and of all the papers that have been published since 1900, and they took only the title page of all those papers, and they worked it out. If they had to put them all, pile them up, it would reach closer to Kilimanjaro. And there's a whole interesting, let's see if this works. No, sorry.
Which are the world's most cited papers? Nature asked Thomson Reuters for the top 100 from its Web of Science database, which goes back more than a century. If you printed out the first page of every item in this index, the stack of paper would almost reach to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro. More than half has been cited only once or not at all. Only the top metre and a half of the mountain has more than 1,000 citations. Among these, Watson and Crick's paper on the structure of DNA. But to reach the top 100 takes something extra special. At number 1, with over 300,000 citations, is a 1951 paper describing a way to measure the amount of protein in a solution. Similar biological methods dominate the list, along with papers on software and statistics. These most cited papers aren't the most glamorous. Many of them got to the top by a quirk of luck or circumstance. Still, scientists have relied on these techniques to make more famous advances. Explore some more of the top 100 papers yourself at nature.com/top100.
Okay, so now if you have those two pictures in your head, whether you do have an online identity or not, it is, on the one hand, you kind of drown in what is going on the internet. But on the other hand, you have a duty to get your research out there so that we don't have all those piles of paper lying there and nobody knows about them. So the latest buzzword is altmetrics, where your impact on society is going to be measured not necessarily by your citations, but by the number of times you have been mentioned on Facebook, Twitter, Google Plus, and blogs, and so on. So this is just an example of one paper. Altmetrics is quite nice. You also have indication of geographically where it was cited, where it was used, and it goes on. You can actually go and see who tweeted your paper or about your paper, the blog. So it has all that information. So in a sense, we have to. Now, there is quite a lot of information already actually too much information for scientists about how to fix your online identity, do this, do that. And Marie sent me one publication that was done by UCT recently, and I found that to be very, solid and not too over the top. And there is one definition there in the middle, the orange, where they identify your online identity, and they say it's the extent to which others can identify you online as a scholar. And that to me I thought was fundamental. So if someone Googles you, and that is the first thing that you have to do is to Google yourself, what do they see? Okay, you having fun somewhere, but you're supposed to be a scholar, your interest on Pinterest, like how to decorate the dining room. So think about those things. There's another graph from that same paper, and the link is down there, where they step by step start assessing yourself, then decide on what you want. And according to me, that is a very, very important step, deciding on what you want, because social media is not for everyone. And you have to find something that can work for you. So Laura now will talk about the fact that she has a social identity and a professional network identity, and she manages the two completely separate. Then there are other tweeters or Twitters who have, who combine everything. So now I'm having lunch, or now I'm at a conference and things like that. Then there's bloggers. Then you have, where's my list? Curators, and then you also have people with pseudonyms on Twitter, especially climate change scientists sometimes. Because of all the abuse they have to endure from the climate skeptics and denialists. So you would have them Twittering, but under another name where they cannot be identified. So you have to decide what works for you. Now for me as a media officer, my work is pretty much cut out on how I interact on the web. So we've got the Stellenbosch University blog, where then on the science faculty's blog I have a carousel where constantly there are about 5 stories circulating. I do about 2 to 3 articles a week, and then I also do those snippets at the bottom where longer standing stories, what we do, BSc alumni profiles and things like that. So we do awards, we do research, interesting research. I tweeted about this as well, and at the moment it's been retweeted about 5 or 6 times. Not a lot, but for my reach, it is quite a lot. Okay, and then what I find exceptionally useful is the role of a curator. And scoop.it helps me a lot with that. You go there, you say what your interests are, and then every day you get a digest from other people who have curated very good, credible information from the internet, and I can see what is relevant to me or to South African or African science, and I can either post it on Facebook. You've got an option where you immediately, the moment you scoop something, it goes onto your Facebook page and your Twitter account immediately. So it helps you to manage those things as well. So I found this another source of telling you or giving information on how to communicate science online in terms of finding your identity. And I found this one very useful. It's on the Science Soapbox at Nature, which is also a very nice blog to follow and to look at. And here, common fears that scientists usually have, afraid of being wrong, being ignored, or even being yelled at. And then you have to be aware of the institutional rules and norms. So I think when you listen to the other researchers now talking about how they do it, I think rather than giving you a list of, oh, do this, don't do that kind of thing, I find it much more useful to actually do something and see how others are doing it and dealing with information and so on. So I'm not giving you any lists. However, the big thing, I am an exceptionally conservative tweeter. I'm a journalist by training, so I have been trained before you put something out there, you go and double check it. So you don't tweet a link without going and look at where the link goes actually. Does it really go to this article or this person or whatever that the person is tweeting about? So I try before I tweet to source and make sure what I'm saying is correct and it can actually go out there. Now, So for the rest of my slides, I'm going to just talk to you about the dangers, okay? That one time where you maybe do an irresponsible tweet and it goes out and it can literally destroy your life, okay? So one, this is now not from a scientist, but an exceptionally stupid lady, really, sorry. This poor woman, Justine Sacco, in 2013, was on her way to South Africa. She was a public relations manager in New York. And she tweeted about her, traveling and things like that. And just before she got onto the plane, she tweeted this one. She only had 170 followers, okay? It's insignificant in comparison with what you've seen, what is out there. But she tweeted this. By the time she got back into South Africa, she was like sacked from her work. And she had thousands of people coming down on her for this kind of statement. The New York Times article I quote here is they actually went and they spoke to her now 2 or 3 years after this incident. And then she talks about how exceptionally traumatized she was. She lost her job. She had death threats. It was just amazing, just horrible. And if you go, it's worthwhile to read the New York Times article further because it talks about other people who have been trolled or victimized or abused on Twitter as well. So it is out there. So I'm conservative, and please be conservative, careful. Unless you are a very famous and important scientist like Neil Tyson. So he has at the moment got 3.4 million, I think, 3.4 million followers. And in Christmas 2014, he tweeted this rather controversial tweet. And he got retweeted 79,000 times, which is amazing. He himself said that on average, when he tweets, it gets retweeted on average maybe 1,000 to 16,000 times was like his limit. But this one just completely took off. The newspapers wrote about it. But he kind of defended and he got off because he's Neil deGrasse Tyson. I couldn't resist because he really had a field day on Christmas last year. Okay. So it depends. As in the media or in the social sciences, because you are venturing into a social world now, it can be very grey. There's no fixed rules. So one person can tweet something and get crucified for it. Another person can tweet something like this. And, there's a front page New York Times article about the fact that this brilliant mind has done this. So they use those words. So it's context, it's who you are. There's a lot of factors playing a role. So that's why I still play it safe. Just to give you an idea of how huge these people are, there's a top 50 science stars of Twitter. They're mostly American and English. And then this was very male-dominated, so Paige Brown Jarreau went and she made a list of all the female Twitters out there. So you will see there's oceanographers, psychologists, planetary scientists, evolutionary biologists, astrophysicists, astronauts, and a whole number of people tweeting away. Okay. The next one, I just want to show you, the next slide, is what happens in the real media as well. Okay, so you have the social media, but at the same time there are repercussions on your traditional media as well. So this is the infamous SMS that's still, I'm just quickly showing it to you. This is the kind of information that I get as a media officer about what is happening about University at Stellenbosch and then specific our faculty. And this is all the major newspapers. It also gives you the AVE, Advertising Value Estimate, and also the audience, potentially how many people saw this or would have read this. So these are just the publications on the Monday after the incident, and this are not all the broadcast stations. If I had to show you the whole list, it would be another 5 screens. So you will see the same message going out everywhere. There is a graph. For example, over the 3 days after the story broke in the City Press on the Sunday, That was the kind of media coverage. The top one is the Western Cape, and then that straight line going up is South Africa, you know, nationally, how all the media started picking it up. So in the traditional media, because it has, you know, we can pick up those kind of trends. So please, be careful. This is my Twitter page for the Faculty of Science. I've got 1,039 followers. It was started by my predecessors, so it is a faculty page. I'm not going, you can go and look. So I tweet about science, about students winning awards, about interesting things about South African science. Your science librarian is sitting here for the Faculty of Science, and she's tweeting about scientific articles to attempt to bring up the old metrics profile of those researchers. And then I retweet her, so we immediately have a bit more impact. So that, in my world, I use a Twitter tool as a networking tool. Okay, I've got my people retweeting, and we kind of a community talking to each other. And then every now and then our tweets will go international. And then, you know, just above the surface. And my purpose is to say, hi, South African science, there is science here in Africa, so listen to us. So that's what I try to do. If there's enough time, Marie, if there's enough time, I just quickly want to, when you think about communicating and your online identity, remember it's a package. There are so many different tools, and you have to have many things working for you. So in this sense, we've launched a science cafe in Stellenbosch in order to be able to talk to the public. So you need online, but you also need warm bodies, networking. So there's different aspects of your identity, and your online identity should be supported by also what is happening on the ground, and your network and your integrity and things like that. So we launched during the word fairs. Another thing is that when we did this, we made use of an existing festival, so because they were already a captive audience. So the Science Cafe thing is actually, and we used Dave Pepler to draw the audience because he already had a network. He was already well known among the festival goers, so we knew that people will come. And then, because we had him as a star kind of thing, we could sell our researchers and say, okay, many of these researchers, for example, Guy Mitchley is internationally known, but not so well known in South Africa. You know, so we used the one to sell the others. And then we amplify it on our Facebook page. I'm just giving you some examples of what we did during word fairs. That was the evening. Quite a number of people, over 150 people came. And then, and then we went and we established a science cafe now outside the word fairs environment. And we are planning, we haven't achieved it yet, to combine this with a social network, Google Hangout, Google On Air kind of thing as well. So the whole, you have the warm bodies, you have people there, but at the same time you amplify what is happening in that science cafe or conference, and you get it to an audience out there. Twitter, yeah, this is just for Twitter handles, please. This is the how. Remember your Twitter handles and your hashtags, very important. And thank you very much. So I hope it gave you a bit of a view of how I work and use social media also to enhance the science and the work being done in the Faculty of Science. Thank you. Questions?
Maybe direct all the questions at the end of the session.
Okay. Okay. Laura, where is yours?
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Laura. I am doing my PhD in the Department of Chemistry and Polymer Science here at Stellenbosch University. And I'm just going to bring to your attention a few things about Twitter and how I personally use Twitter as a grad student and as a scientist. So I had to obviously put in the little Lego figurine, because as soon as I saw it, I was like, this is me as a Lego figurine, and we're going to be there to walk you through this talk today. So I know that some of you here do use Twitter, but there are also people here that haven't used Twitter. So just to start off with, I'm going to go through a few basics about what is Twitter, how do you use it, how do you get started. So this is my profile. If you had to go and look it up, I'm Laura Jane 0103. And just to bring you through what a typical profile page looks like on Twitter. So start off, I've actually gone and recently switched to using my full name rather than just my first name, because now that I'm a little bit more established and I'm a little bit more proud of what my profile says about me, I want now that if you do, as Vida said, if you Google Laura van Laren, this is going to be one of the things that's going to pop up and that you're going to be able to see. Directly underneath that, which is something I think lots of people overlook when they actually set up their Twitter profile, is your biography. Lots of people just put something very simple, and ideally what you want it to be that if people go and click on your name, they see you, they can immediately tell what you are, who you are, where you are, and what you're going to be tweeting about. So as you can see there, it says chemistry PhD candidate, and then I'm a blogger, and a little bit more informally, I'm going to be tweeting a lot about my red wine addiction. So that kind of just puts it all together, and then directly underneath that, you'll see in blue is the link to one of my blogs. So specifically, this is my one about science, because people that are going to be viewing this profile, that's the blog they're going to be interested in. As Vida said, I go and I have two completely separate Twitter profiles. This one for my science-related things and some more personal things. And then I have a secondary account for my personal blog and all those followers. So the two audiences are completely different. So I don't want to alienate one audience or the other with tweets of either topic, so I've gone and split them. So for the purposes of this talk, I'm only going to be talking about my sciencey profile. Then something that you also see at the top is the first of all the tweets that I've actually got there is a pinned tweet. So it's not the most recent tweet, it's something that I've gone and stuck there so that if you come to my page, it's going to be the first thing you see. And it's just a little YouTube video that I made about what goes on in my lab, the kind of science I do, just so that also when you come to my page for the first time, you see something that will immediately tell you what my profile is about. It obviously doesn't have to be something as complicated as that. It could just be a good example tweet, or maybe a paper that you've recently published that you want people to see immediately, maybe a photograph, but whatever it is, something that immediately draws people in. Just a few more things. If you are still new to Twitter, something that's very handy is over here. Twitter goes and always compiles a list of people that are very similar to you. So if you're starting Twitter, it's useful if you're trying to find people that are like you, try to find people that are interested in the same things as you. It's a good way of going and starting to look at building a community. So these are just some of the things that I tweet about. I just pulled a couple of my most recent tweets. So, for example, I share a lot of papers that I'm interested in, things that I've presented either at group meeting or things that have been published by our group. As I said, I'm a chemist, so obviously we have to go and share photographs of all the cool things we do in the lab. And in this case, I sent out several tweets over the afternoon because this was an undergraduate practical that we were doing. So I also did a little bit about what the theory is of the prac and all sorts of things like that. This was last year when we were at a conference. Shared a photo of us actually at our posters, also shared a bit of information about our posters and about the research that we were doing. And sometimes it's just random tweets from either the lab or the office in this case, something which I think most of us at some point or another will empathize with. Okay, so like I said, I also have a blog, and because Twitter limits you to the number of characters that you can send out in a single tweet, sometimes if you have something important to say, a blog is a good way to have to go and actually do a full story of that. And then I use Twitter, just a short sentence or two about the blog post with a link so that I can then share my blog with my Twitter community. Rather than if I just put it on my blog by itself, it might not see that many people and that many views, but using Twitter I can spread that information out, and that's just the same video that I had earlier. And then as a result of Twitter, I've also been asked to do a bunch of other blog posts for other things, so this is just an excerpt from one of the articles I wrote recently about the research that we're doing. And again, it was just a nice way to be able to share the research that we actually do here in Africa with what was actually a UK-based audience. So it was quite a nice thing that, one, they could actually see that we do some pretty interesting science in Africa, but also the fact that I was asked to do this as a result of Twitter was also just a nice way of actually being able to show that people overseas are receptive to hearing what we have to say, and they do actually take us seriously once we can go and take the initiative of showing them, look, we do some pretty awesome science. It's not just we're stuck in Africa doing whatever we do. And just quickly, another of one of the Twitter handles that I do manage is this one for Alchemist Society. This was a society that in 2011, myself and some fellow students helped found to be the very first the very first society aimed at chemistry students and chemistry staff at the Stellenbosch University. And just using things like our Twitter page and our Facebook page, it's a great way of being able to let people know about the events we're doing, let people know about the things that are happening in our community, and then also go and share, the photos and the feedback after an event. So the question that I get asked most often when people find out that I use Twitter a lot is, why do you use Twitter? I think when the general audience thinks about Twitter, they think about teenagers going and sharing photos of all their food and other just pointless babble. So I thought I'd go and share a little bit more about why we as scientists should be using Twitter. And so just to demonstrate this, on Monday morning I sent this tweet out. So the hashtag that you see there is just for a chemistry community that I'm part of, but obviously there will be hashtags for all fields of interest, where I just said, folks, I need your help. Please tell me why you love using Twitter, because I thought it's one thing just to say me as one person, but let's go and ask a general audience. So just what you can see here, it was retweeted quite a few times, most notably by Nature Chemistry, which is when I then got a lot of responses. I took this off this morning, so that was in 48 hours. Over 6,000 people had seen it, and I got 152 responses from this tweet. So I'm not going to share all of them with you, because lots of them do share the same sort of thing, but we're just going to go through a few examples of why scientists like using Twitter. So I think I sent that tweet out at 8:48, and at 8:49 I got this response back from Alex, who's a postdoc and who's soon going to be a chemist in industry. And he said the most obvious one, because you can get amazing random people from the internet to help you with your presentations. But obviously, of course, what you can do is you can pose a question out to an audience and get a wide range of responses from a wide range of people, especially if you go and you start with first, using in your own community and then get a little bit further out. So the second comment that you see there is by Jason Hoshikawa, who's a PhD candidate in Japan, and that's basically what he said. And then on the right, what you'll see is a scientific communicator that I follow and who follows me, who brought up the fact that there's also this tool which is known as Storyfy. So what Storyfy does is it actually helps you create a presentation based on tweets on a certain topic. So if you're interested in seeing that, you can actually go and search for that hashtag, Twitter for Research, where there are quite a few people that have gone and given a few more interesting responses. So I thought that is also a good thing to bring up. Obviously, the thing that obviously is important to us as scientists is getting our research out there. So that first tweet you see there is from an example of a research group having a Twitter handle that everyone in the group is involved in. And they also mention that Twitter is great for promoting our work, for keeping up with our latest research, being able to publicize your own papers, and what is basically free advertising. And Vida shared about the altmetrics, which is a good way of tracking how people are seeing your thing. And then what I found quite interesting is that we do talk about our research a lot online, and this person I mentioned that they got pre-publication peer review, and actually mentioned in the acknowledgements of the paper the relevant people. So these two are both the scientists in his field, and Stuart Cantrell is the editor of Nature Chemistry, all of whom had helped him along the way while preparing his manuscript on just answering questions, and in particular with editors, helping you as a grad student see what are people looking for, what are common mistakes that you make. And it's just a good way of basically getting more feedback than just the people that you work with on a day-to-day basis. And just as an example of a paper that I would probably never have seen otherwise, but it went viral on Twitter, and it was actually from Aangewandte Chemie, which is one of the big chemistry journals, but it was this paper, which I saw this tweet, which is a synthetic erectile optogenic stimulator enabling blue light inducible penile erection, which obviously, due to the nature of the topic, went quite viral on Twitter. And I think if you look at altmetrics, this is the most shared paper on Aangewandte to date. And it was just a nice way of demonstrating the fact that, yes, you can go and even look at, this is a journal I would look at on a regular basis, but through Twitter you can see things on topics that you might not necessarily be searching for in the first place, which is just a good way of enhancing your scope of things and just being able to see what else is out there. So on that same topic, Twitter is a great way of keeping track of news because it is very immediate. There is a lot of information being shared. This is also an important thing which Vida also jumped on, is that you've got to make sure that the news that you're seeing isn't just something that's being posted but without being validated. You've got to be able to check your sources and be able to be aware of that. And Twitter is also a good way of being able to check your own internal way of, can you judge sources? Can you see what is real and what is possibly questionable? But again, more than just, when I look at the news, normally I'm looking at things very specific in my field, and Twitter is a great way of seeing what is happening generally in science, which, as Debbie goes and says there up in the top, it's a great way of keeping you relevant as an instructor and as a researcher. Then this is one that I can particularly feel for, is the fact that conferences these days normally have Twitter hashtags going on. So before you even get to the conference, you can see who is going to be there. As a researcher, once you're more established, you might know the people that are going to be there, but as a young researcher or as a grad student, you very possibly will only know the people that you're going to the conference with. And so Twitter is a great way to make connections before the conference so that you can immediately, when you get there, you have people that you know, you have people you can talk to, and new friends that you can make and new connections that you can make. And I've had this on more than one occasion where people that I've now met through Twitter beforehand, when I go to a conference or symposium, I can actually meet them in person and make a solid connection rather than just an online one. Then this is also something which I've felt before. I love celebrating other successes and commiserating with failure. So this hashtag that I said earlier, the real-time chem, is basically just that. It's chemists sharing what happens real-time, day-to-day, what goes on in the lab, which is also a good way of seeing that you're not alone, because sometimes when you're stuck in the lab, it really can feel like you are all alone and you're the only person that this is ever happening to. And sometimes I think, especially in Africa and South Africa, we get stuck. We're the only people that ever get stuck with broken equipment, and the electricity is always going off and the water is always going off and everything is going wrong. And being able to look online and say, it's not just you, it's okay, take a deep breath, we'll be fine. Other people also have these problems, we can get through it together. And basically something I've personally found is that the sense of community can actually be quite incredible for people that you haven't actually met before. So in my case, it's the chemistry community that I've gone and formed some really good connections with, some good networking connections with, but also just some good personal connections so that we can talk to each other about our science and about what's going on, and just kind of be in touch with people that I would normally never have met. So in case of either physicists or mathematicians that are also interested in chemistry. And by going on Twitter, I'm no longer just stuck by my little community. Normally if I'm at the lab, I'll talk to the grad students around me, I'll maybe talk to one or two professors, but that's it. Whereas if I go on Twitter, suddenly I'm connected to grad students, to undergrad students, to professors, to editors, to scientific communicators, to all sorts of people who are interested in the same things that I'm interested in. And we can get together and we can talk as peers rather than being stuck by that hierarchy that we can sometimes get stuck into at a university. So just to finish off, I thought I'd share a few of my tips about using Twitter efficiently. So, like I said, finding your community is very important. When I first joined Twitter way back when, I think 2010, when I was an honors student, I probably spent the first 2 years on Twitter with about 10 followers, mostly tweeting pointless babble, not really getting much out of it. Once I started to find my community, started to use things like hashtags, hashtag chemistry and such on, to find people that are also specifically interested in sharing the things that I'm interested in, then you can start forming connections and building that community. The most important thing, which I think some people are missing out on Twitter, is the fact that it's about interacting. It's not just about going and posting all your things and hoping that someone else is going to read them, or on the other side, not posting anything, just reading what other people have to say. Both are, well, I'd say just reading what other people have to say, you're probably going to get more out of it than posting your own things and hoping for the best. But you're not still getting the full experience out. And the whole way that you're going to form those connections and form that network is by interacting. It's when you see something interesting that someone else has posted, to comment on it, to retweet it, to send your 2 cents in. When people send things to you, don't just read it and ignore it, because then they're never going to talk to you again. Read it, reply to them, say, thank you for your opinion, maybe then start a conversation. And importantly, interactions are the most important part of Twitter, I feel. Be selective about the accounts you follow, which is something also I think some people, especially when you get started, want to go and follow everything that sounds very interesting, and then you log in to Twitter and you see that newsfeed and you just scroll, nothing ever sounds interesting to you. That's not what you're going to be getting the most out of your Twitter experience. Be selective, and remember that you change and your audience changes. So just because you liked a Twitter account at one point, and it was relevant to you at one point, if a year later you find that you're constantly scrolling past their stuff and never looking at it, it's okay to unfollow. There's no one looking out over your shoulder that's going to judge you for it. If you're not getting anything out of that experience, it's just holding you back. So constantly be tweaking what is in your newsfeed to make sure that you're seeing the things that you want to see. And then this point over here is also, your tweets are going to be showing up in someone's newsfeed. You don't want them to be constantly scrolling past your things and never seeing them. And a big way of making sure that people will see your tweets is by adding a photograph or adding an infographic, because we're human beings, our eyes are drawn to those pictures immediately. If you just see a wall of text, you're not going to look at it. If you see a picture, your eyes get drawn to it, you can see what it's about, and then you read the text. So if you looked at lots of those tweets that I shared earlier from my own page, either have pictures or videos attached to them. And things that I normally, if I'm going to be sharing a link, for example, to a blog post, I'll often put one of the pictures from the blog post in that tweet, so that also people can see what it's going to be about before they even follow the link. Just because if they can see what it's going to be about, they're more likely to click through and follow that link. And then, possibly most importantly, remember, once it's online, it's there forever. There is a delete button. The delete button basically only hides it from you, so you never have to see it again. Because once it's out there, anybody can take a screenshot of it, it gets archived online, it's there forever. So Vida showed some very good examples. Especially if you're going to be sharing something very opinionated, if you're going to be sharing something possibly controversial, think about it. You don't have to press send immediately. What I often do if I'm going to be weighing in on something is I'll type it in. I'll give it 15 or 30 minutes, then go back and look at it, see if I still want to say those exact same words, and then if I'm still happy with it, then I'll press send, which is just a little way of kind of internally monitoring what you're saying so that you can hopefully avoid disaster. Okay, so that's basically what I wanted to share up front. Afterwards, I will be available for questions if anyone has anything about either using Twitter or about using blogs or YouTube also as a scientist. Okay. Thank you for your attention.
Thanks very much. Don't worry. Fine. Okay, good afternoon, everybody. So, I'm afraid I don't tweet much, although I just did send one about the last talk and saying that I should tweet more. But I do use a number of tools in my daily work, and I'm a senior researcher at the Center for Invasion Biology. And over time, the tools that I use have changed from being things that just help me do my work to actually creating a profile about me as a researcher. And that's what I've been asked to talk to you about today. So the first part of this profile is really about making you visible. Because I guess the most important thing as a researcher is that it's pointless if your research is invisible. And these days, that doesn't only mean your research, but it also means you. Also, you get to be able to show what you want others to see. So obviously you have peer-reviewed publications. If you're an early career researcher, then you may not have a lot of early peer-reviewed publications, but you can share other things. So a lot of the tools that I'm going to be talking about will allow you to share other things as well. You can share reports that you've written, perhaps magazine articles. At the moment at the Centre for Invasion Biology, myself and Sarah are putting together a whole issue of a magazine, Quest. And it won't enter into the peer-reviewed literature, but there may be some really handy things that are in there that some people will want to see. And as we've learned already, these things pop up on Google, and so people can actually tune in and read some of the research that you do. And one of the things that is becoming more and more obvious is that as researchers, we're expected to engage with the community that we live and work in. So we're not simply sitting inside our brick towers, but we're supposed to go out there and engage. So doing some of this stuff and making yourself and your research more visible and presentable to people out there is part of what we do. It's part of my job, certainly. Then increasing your visibility, just be aware that one of the first things to do, and I don't think we're having a presentation, but Peter's already talked to us about this partly, is using the existing institutional infrastructure to your full advantage. That means creating a profile on your department's website and using the office that we have for promoting work that you do here. I think that's really important because your status on the internet is the credibility we're standing behind is the University of Stellenbosch, and it's very important that you have a presence there as well as having this more amorphous presence on some of these other sites, because when people want to check that you really are who you say you are, they're going to want to visit Stellenbosch University, and they're going to expect to find you there when they search for you. And use the social media to get what you want from it. Don't just put up anything, and because as we've seen already, that can actually backfire, and you might get a lot of stuff back that you don't want. And it's about selling yourself. So when you're selling yourself, you've got to be quite careful, as we've heard, and you really want to sell yourself professionally. So it's always tempting to put up photographs in your talk of your dog, and this is my dog, and obviously I'm very proud of my dog. Her name's Comet, but it's perhaps not appropriate always to put up pictures of my dog. Neither is it appropriate for me to put up pictures of myself for the morning after. But something like this, which isn't actually of myself, but one of my colleagues, I'm holding a catfish during a recent field trip that we did. These catfish are invasive in the Sundays River system, and this actually tells a story. So this kind of picture can go along with something that I might want to put on the internet, as could this one, which is a photograph of my hand. My hand's holding a frog that we found had eaten another frog. So the pictures can tell stories, and so obviously pictures you can take can be very, very helpful, and you can use pictures in all sorts of ways on your blogs and in your profiles, as we will see later on. So today I want to talk about some of these sites that are emerging, and over the past few years there are lots and lots of more of these things emerging. This one's called academia.edu, and I just put a few out here that I have accounts with. ResearchGate that I'm talking about, Google Scholar. This is ORCID. If you don't have a very distinctive name, then every researcher is going to have a research ID, which is a very long number, because we are all just numbers. And so if you don't have an ORCID number yet, then you will be given one eventually. but you can go and get one yourself by going to orchid.com. And this is Mendeley that I'm going to talk about as well. And lastly, I put up here the Web of Science from Thomson Reuters, because for me, this is where it all started. This is where I started interacting with the internet in terms of literature and doing literature searches. I would note that when I was an undergraduate, before this was on the web, I actually went and pulled down big old books that they had in the stacks and looked through them looking for citations. Because one of the really useful things about the Web of Science is that not only can you find the paper that you're looking for, and with the integration with Stellenbosch's library, we can click directly to that paper with a link underneath, but you can see who else has cited this publication. So this is a super useful, and I'm sure everybody here has interacted with the Web of Science. But did you know that the Web of Science is also encouraging you to create a profile? So that we have the Web of Science, and this is called Researcher ID, which is the Web of Science's, or Thomson Reuters' own way of putting forward researchers with their own profiles. And my prediction is that this is going to become more sort of social media based in the future. So there's no potential to put up photographs or have conversations at the moment, but I think it's going to come, because I think the success of things like ResearchGate and academia.edu are so good that Thomson Reuters will be jumping the bandwagon soon. Okay, so is there anyone here who's never used Google Scholar? So I'm looking for hands going up. No, there's no hands going up. So how many of you who use Google Scholar also have a Google Scholar profile? Only 2 of you, 3 of you, possibly. Not sure, some of the people at the end. So of those who don't have a Google Scholar profile, how many of you have looked at other people's profiles on Google Scholar? Okay, so I was thinking, look, everyone knows what this is about, so there's no point in me actually doing this, but I can see that maybe there is. I have to actually get my glasses out of my pocket here. So for Google Scholar, it should be filling it in. Oh, it's not. So for Google Scholar, we can see that you have a web page like this, and most of us are used to typing in somebody's name. I'm going to type my own name in here, and we can see that there are some papers that I've written and some papers that other people that share my name have written. But apparently I'm the only one that has a Google Scholar profile. So if I click through to that, you can see that there's a silly picture of me outside a museum in Paris. But basically it allows people who have found one paper that they know that they want to read that I've written, and that there's lots of other papers that I have written, and they can scroll through these here, and rather like the Thomson Reuters site, you can actually get user metrics up here as well. So you can get Google Scholar have their own H-index, and you can see what your citations are like over time and how many citations you've got per year. Now, this is mostly for other people, but one thing that I do use, and I'll visit this place about once a week, is I click backwards here to see who's actually citing my work. So of things published in 2015, for example, when I was preparing this talk, I noticed that somebody's actually cited this paper that only came out about a month ago. So I don't know how these people already knew about our paper in time to get it out there. Maybe one of them reviewed it, but I can very quickly see that none of these people were authors on my paper, but they've got a paper that's actually directly related to what I was publishing on. So what I should do is now try and get hold of this paper, and one of the ways that I can do that is just go straight into Google Scholar, type it up there, and there's no link to it at the moment. So sometimes you'll see that there are links. Back again. So you can see that here we have full text Stellenbosch lots of times, and here you can see that there's a full text at ResearchGate, and I'll come back to that a little bit later. So apparently that paper I'll have to write to the authors in order to try and get a hold of a copy, and I can probably get their emails through Google Scholar. So it's actually a very powerful engine for checking out your own research and things that are happening in your field as well. Oops. Got back to the beginning here. Okay, so what do you need in order to sign up for Google Scholar? And the answer is an email address. So if you want to create your own Google Scholar account, you only need an email address, and it doesn't have to be a Gmail account. Okay, so you can do this using your institutional email address if you want to. Can you put any articles or only the ones that Google finds? You can actually put any articles that you want to on here. So it doesn't have to be ones that are found by the Google search engine. Can you remove articles? This actually becomes quite relevant for a number of reasons. But you can actually remove articles from Google Scholar, which is handy, or from your own profile. They may still appear on Scholar. And one of the things that I like about this is that there is no spam. You can choose to have alerts, but the alerts can be completely passive, so they only actually pop up when you visit the Google Scholar page. And personally, that's the way I like it. My email inbox is quite full enough as it is. So I would say it's quite a handy thing because it allows people to find you and find your work. And because you can put on there other articles, this is just a citation, so this is just not the PDF articles themselves, but just the citations, then it actually alerts people to the fact that you may be doing more stuff than they can find, perhaps by going through some of the other processes. Okay, ResearchGate. Is there anyone out there who has a ResearchGate account already? Okay, much interesting. Many more of you. So probably don't need to say too much about ResearchGate. You can probably tell me more than I know. I do have an account, so what I'm going to do is try and log into my account, because I think that's .net. Apologies. So ResearchGate, whoops. You have to use your institutional email to join up. Okay, so for us that's Sane CZA email. Apparently once you have joined up, you can change to a different email account if you prefer to. But in order to join up, they want to know that you're actually at a university or a research institute. Oops. Then you have to be able to remember the password that you've given them. That's often a problem. Luckily today, not a problem. So up top here, there are the typical kind of, I guess these things now have a generic feel to them, where you get news feeds, so things that you've ignored for a while. Here there's a request for a paper that I simply can't upload because it's way too big, and various things like a little new message that somebody called Olivier in France has said that he's not upset that I can't upload it. And there's various other news feeds that are coming through here. But one thing that we've seen already with the Google Scholar screenshots there is that ResearchGate is something that people are uploading their PDFs to. The legality of that we might hear later. I would say it falls into a grey area. It's a closed door club. So in fact you're not allowing it to everyone, but if you are a member of ResearchGate, you get access to a whole range of publications that otherwise are not around, and there's a lot of stuff out there. So one of the things that you can do in ResearchGate is you can follow people. So if I have a look at my profile down here, it should, here you go. So I've got lots of people following me, and I've got some people that I'm following, and if I look back, their articles appear in this live feed. So in the same way that in Google Scholar you can go and look at who's citing you, and that's kind of quite a formal way of doing it. This is a very much more informal thing, but it opens me up and exposes me to a whole range of different publications that are going on out there. And there's also lots of other, what I consider to be rather strange things in ResearchGate, and perhaps some of you might know, but I'm not entirely sure of what their utility is. You have these things, and people keep endorsing you for different things. Is anyone aware of, does anyone know what they're for? No? So this is kind of a little gimmick of ResearchGate, that you can be endorsed for things, and some people seem to be endorsing over and over again, and I'm not entirely sure why. But obviously you can list all the publications that you have again. Again, you don't have to keep this just to peer-reviewed papers. You can put up magazine articles. There's one of my students putting up a poster that he wants me to acknowledge co-authorship of, and all sorts of other things as well. So you can keep it as broad or as narrow as you like, and the choice is yours. You don't have to have this maybe later, Nick. So lastly, I wanted to talk about, so just go quickly over ResearchGate, have a look at this. Says, what do I need? You need an institutional email address, and that has been a problem for people that I've worked with in the past who are not affiliated to particular institutions. Can I put in any article or only the ones ResearchGate finds? So you can add any article, you can upload, it doesn't even have to be published or peer-reviewed or anything. Can I remove articles from my profile? This is a bit of an issue with ResearchGate, is that what happens when you co-author a publication and several people upload the same thing. There then exists multiple copies of it, and they cannot be deleted and they cannot be merged at the moment. So you can remove them, but then you're removing a whole bunch of your stats and statistics. So it's a bit of an issue with ResearchGate at the moment. It has been for a while. They may sort it out in the future. Well, let's hope they do. And you can stop the spam. So be aware that with ResearchGate, if you sign up, you're going to get spam immediately. Go into the settings and just unclick all the emails if you don't want to get spam. So it will automatically send it to you, but you can stop this. Okay, the last one I want to quickly talk about is Mendeley. How many people out there using Mendeley already? Yes? Okay, and in Mendeley, are you using Mendeley as a piece of desktop software, which looks like this? Or are you using Mendeley as a sort of web-based, not like this? Oh, you are using Light. Okay. So this is how Mendeley looked, or actually not quite as sophisticated as when it first started. And it was simply a place for storing your research articles that you're interested in and that you want to cite in your papers, and it's a way of getting the bibliography at the end of your manuscript written out for you instead of having to type it out every time manually yourself. And there's a number of other bibliometric softwares that also do this. EndNote, perhaps, by Thomson Reuters being one of the best known. But Mendeley has morphed from doing just that to becoming a kind of social media or science type site as well. And I'm just going to try and sign into that now because I think it's more useful than... Aha, there's a Save to Mendeley button there already. Okay, so again, you can use any email. You don't have to use your Stellenbosch email for this. You can use any one you have. And you can hopefully use a password that you're going to remember and are not going to make a mistake of in front of people when you go talking in it. Now, it's signing in. I'm happy to say that I've remembered my password. And you get a kind of news feed down here at the beginning, and the news feed is related to all the different researchers that you follow. So very, very similar to ResearchGate. The one difference from ResearchGate is that all of the articles that you save onto your desktop Mendeley automatically get synced up onto the internet, and you have 2 gigabytes of storage to use there free. Okay, so you can put PDFs in there as well, but basically it means if you're on the move or if you're working between home and work a lot, then all the things that you have on your work computer automatically come through home. Very, very nice feature. And then papers. So you can do a search for papers that happen to be on Mendeley, and you can search. You have an advanced search option as well, so you can type in title and authors and all the rest of it. So you can actually look for papers that other people have out there and have already entered in. So you can use it a bit like you would use Google Scholar. And one of the things that I find quite handy as well is you can have a group Mendeley. It's going to only be up to 3 people if you're not paying for it. But that means that you can share publications within your group. Unfortunately, my own lab's become a little bit big for that, but I tend to share it with newer people that are coming into the lab so they can get up to speed with publications, and then they can do those sort of things themselves with each other. So Mendeley, it turns out, started as this piece of bibliometric software and has now gone into more of a kind of social media type situation, whereas some of the others, ResearchGate, lack that bibliometric component. So it does leave you in a bit of a quandary, I think, because I certainly don't have time to constantly update all of these different sites. And I noticed on Academia Edu this morning when I looked at it that there were over 50 notifications that I hadn't looked at for obviously quite a while. And I think you have to make a call as to which one's going to work best for you. And if you're already using Mendeley and people in your research group are already using Mendeley, then that's great. You know, stick with it. Build your profile. Work with it. It's going to work really well. If people in your group are already using ResearchGate, then stick with it and invest in building that profile and create that presence. I don't think that there's a whole lot to be gained from having lots of profiles on lots of different social media. And if you don't have any profile and you don't know anyone who's using it, then just go try having a look and seeing which one works best for you, I guess. So then lastly, with Mendeley, a few questions then. You only need an email address. It doesn't have to be institutional. You can put any article in, but then it's not just your articles now. It's not just your profile necessarily. It's any articles that interest you at all. And can you remove articles? That's quite an interesting one, because if a lot of the articles are already up there, and I think the only way of removing them is to actually go and help. So you press the help button, you ask for support, and you eventually send them an email address and you say, look, somebody put this up, but they spelt this wrong, and I'd like it removed because I've got the correct one. So, and you will automatically get spam again about everything, but you can stop the spam. So just go straight in and unclick in the settings there. Very possible to do. So I guess the bottom line is that in terms of being a researcher and having that researcher social media profile out there, it's up to you to be the researcher that you want other people to see. Okay, thanks very much.
Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to warn you, they left the auditor to last. I'm just putting it out there. Okay? Just very quickly, do me a favor, stand up. I told you to stand up. Stand up. If you turn to the person behind you, first row, and the person, please greet the person, because that's also called social media. So it's pretty out there. So you've been sitting for the past hour. As I said, so we're standing. I'm not big on the whole standing in one place at one time. I'm quickly going to do a very short little presentation. It's going to be boring. I am an auditor. I'll introduce myself as part of the presentation. My name is Rian. This is the analog me. Hello. How are you doing? Okay. I'm Rian. That's my family. These two aren't really part of my family, but they adopted me, so they kind of feel like my family. Okay. These are some of my friends. Not all of my friends, just some of them. The ones that gave approval for me to actually use their photo. Okay. These are my pets. And just in case somebody's asking, I do have a license. Okay. And you do need a license. I live at the beach. I also spend some time in the winelands. I'm confused between the two. I like to travel, particularly cruising, so I travel quite frequently. I work at this institution. My office used to be located here, but then this happened. Okay. Now my office is open plan. I mean, I'm so accessible. I have no walls, no windows, no roof. When the students need to get hold of me, they seriously can get hold of me. Okay. I'm temporarily located in the Peril building. During the day, I lecture to students, but sometimes I think they're more a bit confused than actually anything else. But at the end of the day, I'm actually quite proud of them when they graduate. I also do research. But bear in mind, I'm an auditor, so people think we do accounting research like that. But yours is much cooler. They get to blow stuff up, we don't. Okay. That's my analog world. Problem is, I live in a digital world. This is me online. These are my hobbies. My interests online. This is me at work online. I hold the following qualifications. Nobody really cares, but that's what I have online. I hold the following job titles, and again, nobody cares. I represent these organizations amongst others. Apparently I have these skills, but again, as John said, none of them are actually on my CV at all. I get paid for my opinion because I am an auditor. Nobody wants them. The people who want them the least are my mum and my girlfriend. Okay. These people actually did care about my opinion. And they interviewed me, and I had interviews, and I was publicized, and you know, but they actually cared. And the reason why they cared is not because of my analog self, they cared because of my digital self. Okay. Apparently, I have 238, maybe 239 online friends. The one's having the birthday, and you'll see there's one that I still need to decide whether I'm actually friends with them or not. Okay. These are people which Facebook actually thinks that I might know. I have 291 connections, but bear in mind they're not really my friends. These people stalk me 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and they can. And they've realized consequence because there one of them sits. Second from the top. So that's freaking scary. Okay. I'm popular. My popularity improved by 21% in the past 30 days. I'm an all-star. That's like legend status, I'm sorry. At everybody's standards. Okay. I had a Facebook group called Auditor Sexy. I had just under 1,000 auditors in one venue. And you know what they normally say? What do you call 1,000 auditors at the bottom of the ocean? A good start. Okay. This is the only Facebook group globally that had 1,000 auditors that actually cared about something in one place. The Facebook was called Auditor Sexy, hashtag. Okay. This was so popular. I had about 560 people who wanted to join, which I decided to block. And the reason being is they misunderstood the audit part, but they clearly understood the sexy part. But they missed the whole audit bit. But I blocked them, 560 odd. Okay. I had 924 friends. Now I have none, because the university told me to kill my Facebook page. Okay. Just a bit of background, what I did do is I'm the guy last year that asked my students to identify internal control weaknesses across campus, record it, and put it online. How cool is that? Okay. But I had to kill it. Okay. My analog self is experience a bit of conflict in terms of the two worlds. I'm confused about what's my actual identity. And what happens if those two worlds actually collide?
Some alien life force has sent real-life video games to attack us. Pac-Man's a bad guy? Incoming! Donkey Kong.
It's just a barrel! How bad can it hurt?
The only way to
take down Pac-Man is with ghosts.
You want ghosts? These are your ghosts.
Oh yeah! We're the only ones who can do this! I'm kidding. We are all gonna die. I'm just sorry.
May I introduce to you Professor Iwatani, the creator of Pac-Man.
Pac-Man is not bad. You'll see.
Professor Iwatani, what are you doing?
I will talk to him. He's my son. Hello, my sweet little boy. Look how big you've grown.
It's so sweet. He's so sweet.
I know. You're a good boy.
Somebody annihilate this stupid thing!
To some of you, that might sound familiar. If you're like a boy my age, those games are like awesome. Okay. A lot of people haven't actually realized that the internet has actually evolved over the past couple of years. Okay. We've changed from an environment where we used to what is called the Web 1 environment. We had proprietary individuals. University has a static website. They're the proprietary of knowledge. They contain knowledge. They distribute knowledge to us, the people. In a Web 2 environment where most people think we live, like a Facebook environment, a Facebook world, is anybody can create content. Anybody can create content. Anybody can create content. If you think about it, Facebook is a fascinating tool. It's a consolidation of individual web pages on one sheet. No person will log on to one Facebook page and ever see the same web page. And this is the world we live in. Anybody can create content. Just as much interest, for those who don't know, we actually, you know that Life 2.0, this 2.0, it's not a marketing gimmick, it started with us, the techies, the computer nerds. We're actually living now, and most people haven't realized it, in a Web 3.0 environment, where content is no longer generated by individuals or companies. Your computer can generate content. I mean, the iPad Air at the moment is you can literally go to Stellenbosch. I can go onto my iPad. I can Google search food. And Google will literally use my GPS location to tell my Google that I'm actually in Stellenbosch. It's creating content. Okay. The temperature gauge on my thing will tell today would classify as summer. My past cookies, my past history on my computer, on my iPad will say that I like kind of pizzas. So my top searches in the future in the world we're going to live in, I'll Google food and a bunch of rubbish will come up. It will actually say, because it's warm outside, I'm like in a tropical mood. Because I like pizzas, okay, and because I like it's warm weather, and because of my location. It will tell me what the closest Thai restaurant is that sells pizza with pineapple, because it's summery. Okay. That's the world we're currently living in, people are working on. The Internet of Things, etc. And people haven't realized that the internet has actually evolved. The landscape, John and Laura showed a couple of examples. This is not even close to what's actually out there and what you can use. From a research point of view, from your personal point of view, from your professional point of view. I just wanted to show you, seriously, quickly try and find the one or two things that you actually use on this thing. You might come up with 3, 4, 5. There's a heck of a lot out there. The internet has changed significantly. Now, I'm going to talk about the nasty side of being online with digital profile. Okay. What I'm going to say is I'm going to talk about 6 main themes. Just bear in mind, these aren't my personal views. What we just decided is everybody else spoke about how positive the world can be if you use social media and use the internet. Is somebody has to kind of like balance it out to tell you what can actually go wrong. And also in light of the fact that an auditor, we get paid to identify risks, opportunities, and recommend them. So I broke it down into a couple of themes. Personal identity, it's online forever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever and ever. If I was arguing with a 5-year-old, I could keep going for really long. Okay? Who are you really interacting with online? Okay. There's only so much time in the day. content is unfortunately king, and the scariest is you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. And I explain what these 6 themes are. Your personal identity. A lot of people haven't realized that your personal and your private life is merged. The reason why I put out my past history, my analog world, and my digital world, is if you build up a brand for yourself and you build up a personal or professional identity and you are online, it's very easy to merge your professional and your personal life, where you represent those organizations that you spoke about. John mentioned earlier, is your name should be at least on the university website. So if you do something in your personal capacity and somebody Googles you, seriously, my home address is not going to come up. My work address is going to come up. So there's a merger between your corporate footprint and your personal identity. This is a good example. I quickly went a bit fast. While I was talking, this is Stacy. She's a well-known researcher. She blogs about her research. Yeah, that's her digital footprint, the stuff that she puts online. This was a holiday in Spain, which somebody else put online, commonly referred to as digital shadows. Okay? She's a friend of mine. Just for the record, I put the stars on. Now you can't tell me that doesn't have an influence on your professional identity. Okay? And again, I put the stars on. Okay? So the first thing is there's actually a merge between your professional, your academic, and where you want to be. As auditor, we're in a weird world. We're academics, we're business people, we're students, we're everything. It becomes a merge, and you need to realize that you're representing all of them at once. A good little example is this most recent post, and the reason why I put it up, because it is recent, is Adrian Basson made a post about some sports minister that happened to go watch a little match. And he asked the question, who pays? It ended up in a Twitter fight. Okay? And if you read the bottom quote, a lot of people asked Fikile Mbalula who actually paid. Okay? But he's answering Adrian Basson back because he's the senior editor of a newspaper. But I did cut a bunch of in-between discussions out. But the point that I want to make is your professional and your private identity, if you are established and you want to be established, okay, it's very easy to say I want to separate the two. How do you separate two when you can just Google stuff? Which comes up? Your personal or your private? Okay. So you need to bear that in mind. I mean, what is personal identity about? The permanence of the internet. Okay. What people don't realize is once something goes online, and once it's Googleable, let's be honest, it's fact. I mean, I've had a 5-year-old, and I've got a quote that says, let's ask Uncle Google, Mommy. Because remember, when it becomes Googleable, it becomes fact. Now, I've put up a couple of examples here. This is a tweet that a student did about me. It was about a competition about one of the most influential under 35 CAs in the accounting profession. And my student decided he will tweet my name. That's a Google search. That's permanent. There's no deleting a tweet. If you Google it, it will come up. Here's another search. This is actually one I like. It's very funny. Is we've got a BREker who's kind of like our gossip girl in BREC, in the BREC honors class. And nobody knows who the BREker is, who gossip girl is. And some guy went and tweeted, and he said, hy het uitgefigure wie at die BREker is. Rian Ratman. Met al sy grade kan jy minder verwag. Okay. That is fact now. It's no longer some person's opinion. If you Google it, that comes up when you Google my name. Okay. So you need to realize, stuff that goes online stays there for really long, whether you want it there or not. And the question is, do you actually want it there? Because there might be an argument to make that there's a lot of positive contributions of, for example, uploading drafts. Okay. But the thing is, that draft remains online. Some publications might actually say, but you know what, you've posted this stuff online, it's freely available, why do I actually want to publish it? Okay. Some people can realize, but you know, your draft that you want opinions from, a bit of feedback on your research is, well, I actually think it's a cool idea. So why don't I do it in a different context and publish it first? And again, this happens. And what you need to realize, this is tongue-in-cheek examples of tweets. Here's a tweet that somebody made that said he received a a late draft of a paper. Okay? The second draft is awful. Now imagine you live in a world where you submit draft 2 because you just wanted to like feel the water a little bit, and a couple of weeks down the line or months down the line with your academics, you like me, you take like really struggle to publish, like 2 years down the line, when you get this or completely re-edited paper and you want to publish it, and the guy who has to review it just wants to Google about a couple of things, and this comes up, not as a tweet, but as a Google search. Is that guy going to think it's an awesome paper 2 years down the line? Or is he going to be like, yeah, this was rubbish 2 years ago? I don't know, but it's something to think about. Okay? Because what goes on the internet, it's permanent. The context is also very important. If you do blog, and if you do tweet, and if you go online in shortened versions, academic papers range, what, between 15 pages and 30 pages? And then you really get annoyed when the journal says, sorry, Broer, 25 pages. And you're like, but no, I've got a lot to say in those other 10 pages. But you can't. So now if you struggle with publication, what happens if you struggle to get your idea across in 140 characters? Or to get your idea across in a blog that is 800 words? So the context is specific, and the problem with online communication is it's sometimes misinterpreted. It's also one-dimensional communication, because you can't really ask long questions. It comes back in short bursts and discussions, which could even potentially result in defamation, okay, depending on where you're going to. So the context is not necessarily communicated appropriately on online media, and that context can influence your ability. And because, let's be honest, what does the media read? The 25-page thing or the 800-word thing? Vida, journalists, wat lees hulle?
Oh, they don't read.
See, that's the problem. Okay, I can even tell you maybe spot the city. Okay, but the problem is, what does the guy read? The shortened version that does not communicate the hours and hours and hours and hours and hours of work. Okay, and you can get misquoted. And this is actually a brilliant one. It hasn't got to do with my, well actually this one does. It has to do with the work that we do on cyberbullying. Because remember, cyberbullying is actually, for those who are moms, is actually worse than bullying. Because remember the guy that told me I had big ears? Remember, it's only like those 10 people in class who actually knew that I was the oak that had big ears. I still do. I happen to like them now. But if it goes online, the entire school knows about it. The entire world knows about it. Okay? And you can get misquoted. And this was a quote that I did say some things to the newspaper about cyberbullying. News 24 on multiple platforms came out and said the extent of cyberbullying in South Africa is underestimated. But it's clear that the phenomenon is growing. According to Rian Ratman, lecturer at Stellenbosch University. Then, so on another publication, they went and said, Rian, Udish Ratman, that's quite my name, also gave the same quote and said the extent of cyberbullying, broadly defined, is unclear. He changed my words. Then, in another publication, same Media 24, they went and said, but he stated that cyberbullying is broadly defined as, yeah, I actually never defined it. Okay. I just said that it's growing, but they put words in my mouth. Okay. And again, this becomes permanent. Luckily, the gist of it is not a big issue, so we move on with our lives. Okay. And because we live in a world where we can, it's not just people combining things. Search technology has grown to the extent that you actually electronically can recombine multiple sources. I mean, we're living into a world where the news finds you, where the news, based on your search history, will find you the news that's more appropriate to you, that you want, and also combine the news into one article from multiple news sources into one source. Now, this is an example of a recombination. And it was, I haven't got the full post there, but basically is somebody made a Twitter post about Alan Craig Knott. Okay? Now, if you don't know who Alan Craig Knott is, he's the CEO of Cell C. Now, remember, CEO from Cell C, he's like, yeah. Okay? Rian Ratman is like, yeah. I'm only popular because of my 21% awesomeness that I grew in the past 30 days. But I'm like, yeah, he's here. In what world have we had a discussion about why I left auditing for a particular reason. Rian Reitman answering, and the rest says Alan Craig not, to a question of, yeah, we kind of like, but that quote doesn't sound like if we like this. The quote makes it sound we like that. We had a discussion about auditing. Okay. So you realize this stuff's permanent, but you also don't necessarily know how it actually arises. Content is king. But what people don't realize when you do post online, when you do blog, when you do share, okay, or when syndication happens, right, is those articles that you post, that you share, that you distribute, is, well, firstly, you're retweeting them under your online profile. You're adding, potentially, you're adding credibility to something which contains errors. Because you didn't vet it, but you're posting it, so you're kind of like implicitly saying, you know what, I think this is okay. Okay. It could contain malicious code, and I'll show you an example just now. You know, when I started working, I was told you never click on a link on the email that has the @ sign. Correct? Okay. For the postgraduate students, you're too young for those emails. Okay. But they live in a world, when you have a tweet, you expect the @ sign to be there. So we click on things that could potentially have malicious code in it. We share photos, which potentially could have copyright on it. We share images and clips that could potentially have malicious software in it. Now the discussion of what malicious software is, I can speak hours about that in a completely different story. But it could contain nasty things that could infect your computer, make it run slower. Okay? You could use technology that you don't even know. There's a lot of academics that post up their content using wikis, because wikis are actually very convenient and easy to use. It's much easier to use a wiki than it is to use a blog or start a blog. Problem is, I did this. Yeah, I did a master's in computer auditing. In my arrogance, I went to the professor and I said, I will submit my dissertation like they do in the movies. You know, you get the guy who writes like a really long essay and he gets like 50%, and the guy that gets like a little paragraph, he aces it because he got the essence of it. I loaded my assignment, defining what is Web 2, a couple of years ago. I loaded it onto Wikipedia the Friday night. And I emailed Professor Boshoff a link that said, please refer to my assignment on, and I sent him the URL. I thought it was cool. Okay, Wikipedia is a Web 2 tool. He has a URL. Only problem is, the content from Friday till Monday, the rest of the world thought they're expert and they changed it. Okay, luckily I had the foresight. Remember, that's how Wikipedia works. Everybody can contribute. Remember, there was a point people thought Wikipedia was the most accurate encyclopedia in the world. It's not anymore. Because anybody can post content, anybody can change content. Okay? The other problem you have is you can create white noise by pushing too much stuff. And Laura said it, you can't just shove everything out. You've got to think about it. Because you can create white noise around your research, around your area of specialism, which blurs your identity of what you want to do. And the main thing is, if mainstream media picks up on this, you could land in real-life consequences. This is an example, right? And I hope we've got budget for this because I went and bought a bunch of FinWeeks. Okay? But if you're in the business world, people buy FinWeeks. Okay? They pay $30 for FinWeeks. Okay? This is, by the way, I hope you for my budget, want ek het hierdie gekoop. So I'm just putting it out there. Okay? But I brought you FinWeeks. Okay? Because a lot of people buy FinWeeks, read FinWeeks, think that the content in there has to be, I mean, that, you pay for that, right? I think in the library there should be somewhere on a bench as well, that the library pays for it. This article was written by a FinWeek staff reporter. You can't read it, but it says there. The heading is, why you should think twice before going for that accounting degree. That was an article published in FinWeek, the one that you pay $30 for, that has to be accurate, that has to be relevant. And again, by the way, ek het R30 betaal voor, so ek hoop ek kry. Ek het nogal baie gekoop. Just putting it out there. Okay. Yeah. Okay. The original article was written by Johan Fourie, Senior Lecturer Economics. Actually, the title of the actual blog, that's his personal blog. Psycho, Accountants, and Academic Freedom. That's what the article is about. The one that was in FinWeek, that you paid for, the article was, well, why should you think twice before going? It sounds completely different. The biggest problem is, which name do you see? Okay, obviously you can't see it, but Fenwick staff reporter or Johan Fourie, senior lecturer? I actually emailed Johan and I said, listen, I'm an academic, I work in the business world, no offense, I want to publish in Fenwick, how did you do that? His reply was, please ask him to stop. Because they frequently use his personal blog to fill articles. At least Johan Fourie, just as a matter of interest, he's actually one of the young up-and-coming oaks. He has credibility, he does good research. And the reason why he has a personal blog, because if you're an economist and you want to make a name for yourself, okay, they actually, it's publications, getting your name out there, getting opinions out there. So he wrote this, but again, he didn't want it in Fenwick. The real-life consequence, the entire South African Institute of Chartered Accountants published back in another publication, cited response to the Fenwick opinion piece. Johan Fourie didn't even know about this because it was his personal blog. But this had real-life consequences, not just for him, it also had consequences for the Department of Accounting at Stellenbosch University. Because now it's Johan Fourie, who's a lecturer in economics. Where do we get our students from? Who accredits the Department of Accounting? Psycho. Okay. And then what happened is, in their press releases, they brought out, my picture died now, they brought it out. The only thing I wanted to show you, can you see, that's when you tweet and you put Facebook posts, etc., it comes up like a bunch of swear words. Historically, I actually wouldn't click on those, ever. Now, it's standard knowledge to click on those things. So the point that I want to make is, you don't necessarily know what you're putting out there if you reuse other people's content. Okay? And more importantly, the implication of this could have real-life consequences. This is an example of how it did have real-life consequences. Okay? Content, as I said, is king. It's not just about the social media that you're writing your blog, etc. Is people are using other tools like mashups. When you use Google Maps to track, this was a little one where they tracked the flight of birds, is you're using a technology which by its nature is easy to reuse, but you don't understand how you use it. That thing could have malicious software, a whole myriad of things. When you upload a YouTube clip of something that you did in your lab, that you recorded, for all you know, you might have recorded something that you shouldn't have. Again, as I said, I told my students, take a camera, take a photo, go out into the world, and actually photocopy all the controls. Just as much interest, amongst other things, the library actually was one of the people who phoned me and complained and said, why are you sending the students to check our access controls at the library? Okay. I had the whiff of risikobestuur phoning me and saying, but why are you doing this? Okay. Because they're recording things that you don't necessarily want to have recorded. You could release sensitive research, intellectual property rights. You can disclose information. To make your content interesting, you take a photo somewhere else. But who's got copyright? You or that someone else? You don't know. I did a video for a bursary fund that I run. Okay? And I put music to it. And the university's lawyers took my post off, literally, 4 hours. Then Lisa Tron phoned me and said, but sorry, I've got to use stock music. My song was just much better, but it's okay. Okay? So you need to think about these things. You could be in breach of university policy, and it could result in financial liability. I mean, the lawyer said, me using One Directions, their one song, Story of My Life, I mean, just a couple of 100,000 odd rand. We actually went and asked if we could use it. And I'm like, no, we're not using that. So we had the movie clip of my bursary fund without music. Okay? It could have financial liability. Okay? Time, if you want to do it, you need to decide how you want to do it. How effectively you want to do it, where you want to be involved. Because remember, for you to remain relevant, for you to build that online identity, okay, you have to be relevant, active, you've kind of got to be entertaining, and you've got to add to the discussion. Okay. But to do that, as I said, you might share photos, you might share movie clips, you might do a bunch of things. You can expose yourself to risks, and it does take time. And you won't necessarily get the output now. You might get it later. More importantly, you also don't know who you actually talk with. This is one of my friends, Amanda Tong. Okay. Yep, she wanted to be my friend. You don't necessarily know who you're dealing with on the other side. You think you know, but again, Amanda Tong, as a matter of interest, we actually interrogated her entire profile. She's completely fake. There's nothing about her. Okay. The origin is Asian, of the actual source of the Facebook group. Amanda is probably some girl somewhere in America that thought she would post up a really nice photo of herself Okay? And some other dude in Asia decided that he actually wants to have a phishing site. So he actually used the profile. The point being is, you don't really know who's a virtual friend and who's a fraudster. Do you really know the background of everybody who's following you? Everybody who's commenting? Now the guy who commented, twofold. You could have a fool who comments. Just to give an idea, this was you can't see the number, but that's about 4,000 people actually commented on this post. Okay? And again, because they're all educated, because they all had an opinion about it, and because all of them were informed about it. So again, you don't really know who's commenting, who's generating content. Similarly, cyberbullying. What happens if that superstar that you idolize in your field of research comes back and makes a negative comment, and makes a comment like this top one, that literally says they should be embarrassed for running a piece, and that piece was actually a clinical trial result that was published in mainstream media. Or alternatively, if in the second comment here, they were actually commenting that the sample that was used in a study is actually too small. If your superstar, the guy that you idolize, does that, the implication on your reputation, emotionally, socially, and professionally, you need to consider that implications. Because again, not everybody is allowed to comment. And what people don't realize is when you do share information online, okay, you do open yourself up to phishing attacks. You do open yourself up to spam. And the more information you actually upload, the easier you make it to get more customized, socially engineered spam and spyware. Because now that email is no longer in a world where it says, "Dear ABSA customer," or "Dear researcher." This is a full fake website. It's actually closed down. Mutual. That they stole from LinkedIn. That's my picture that I had at some stage. My Facebook, my personal Facebook. I have no photos of me actually on there, as in person. It's all cartoons. You would have noticed, initially I was a minion. A couple of weeks ago, I love penguins. They're awesome. Okay? That came from Facebook. These articles were never even written by me. Recombination, electronically. These are publications. And then it has a little bit here that says, if you want to view my profile, click on that. And if you do, it goes to LinkedIn and Facebook, and it steals my information. Because believe it or not, your information is actually valuable. I never even knew there was a market for academics. Like, I can show you examples of fake conference pages. Okay? That predatory list, that Beale's predatory list of predatory journals, seriously, I even knew there was an environment for this. But those emails that are coming through become clearer and become more specific, and you can't distinguish them. Because what do? We actually make this information more available. Okay? Now you might ask yourself, I've kind of scared you now, haven't I? Okay? Because you're damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. Because we had two people who stood up here and said, but you should do it because you want to build a profile for yourself. And then I'm kind of like saying, but maybe you shouldn't. I'm actually not saying that. I'm saying you need to think about it, understand the risks, and then consider it. Because people might even argue that you are a media hog, where that superstar researcher kind of says, but you're not actually adding credibility to it. You're creating a media profile, but you're not creating a research profile. An example being, I know that some sports guy. There's a guy by the name of Tim Noakes, by the way. He comes from the UK. He runs an outdoor business, and as part of his profile, it actually says, "I'm not a sports guru, so don't ask me about my diet." But again, I know nothing about this gentleman's research at all, and I'm not saying his research is bad. But do you think there are people that might think that it's not necessarily? I don't know. Okay, think about it. You might lose credibility, too much self-promotion, right? A lot of people argue, but there's not enough academic rigor. Other people argue when you post stuff online, you actually add academic rigor, because there's not a lot of people reading it and commenting on it. I don't know what the right answer is. You do have the risk that you might not be noticed. Because over the next couple of years, the pressures on academia, researchers, are going to change. I think Professor Kluter the other day actually said, in my world, I've got to get minimum publication in accredited journals so we get subsidy. That's key, that's important. Okay? Well, Professor Kluter said, but you've got to start thinking about your impact factor, the number of citations. So you need to ask yourself, we're heading that direction. There's pressures on academia that is going to kind of, to an extent, if you're a researcher, your job to find funding somewhere. How do you find funding? Not by publishing in a journal that I'm not going to walk out of your life, but that's hidden away in the basement of a library. Okay? Because again, who reads it? But if you create publicity around yourself, people will read it. But what kind of publicity? So you need to ask yourself, okay, there's a lot of tools out there. Do you want to add to the conversation? Do you want to publish in academic journals? Do you want an academic rating? A media rating? Okay. Do you want a high impact factor? Because again, it might become part of your performance evaluation. You don't know. Okay. Do you want to have a high altmetric score, or do you want a higher cloud score? Just as a matter of interest, those are like, it's like social media. You can actually track your publications, citations, etc. Altmetrics, you can see this little bit here, which you can't read. This is your citations, okay, in Twitter, or sorry, mentions in Twitter, Facebook, and news outlets. It actually tracks it. Then it said readers on Mendeley, etc. They don't list it. Cloud looks at media coverage. Is where do you want that score? Okay. You need to think about it. So as I said, you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Because you don't know what's going to be in the next couple of years. Okay. So what is the fuss? Why should you be wary? Is take the time, understand the risks, think about the risks before you decide what you're going to do. Because it impacts right through, from your data to your technology, right through to organization and to the public. At all those levels, okay, you can potentially expose yourself to risks. Okay. So I want to leave you with this thought, right? And you're more than